We're good on YouTube. At least Zoom thinks that it is. Well, as long as I can actually get it to show up in the YouTube dashboard, then we are rocking and rolling. And it's only 6 minutes after. How about that? Hey, Karen, there's a little bit of noise on your line, so I'm going to mute you unless you want to talk, but you're all set with the muting and unmuting controls, right, Karen?
Right.
Okay, cool. There's just a little bit of noise in the background. All right, I just confirmed YouTube is getting the stream. So let's kick things off. Wig, would you mind running the show up until the subcommittee reports? Because that way I can just make sure that
sure,
we're on the right page.
So we've got some guests. Anybody want to make a public comment?
I'll make a comment. This is Barry Steinberg speaking.
Yeah.
The latest issue of Roll Sign, the publication of the Boston Street Railway Association, came in, and in there they had pictures of the construction of the viaduct on the to Leechmere, and it's amazing.
Yep.
That you could see progress, because I'm used to MBTA projects where several months in, you can't even see that anything has been doing. That's as far as I'm taking that comment.
Yeah, it's quite impressive for anybody wanting a little walk on a nice winter day. If you can get close to there, it's pretty interesting. The steel is big. They're redoing the old viaduct, which I think is terrific. And I've got my fingers crossed they're going to do a little bit of nice architectural lighting under it. And they're working pretty hard on the stations, which are a lot easier than things like the power. But you can see the stations going up at most of the locations right now. But definitely Leechmere is the most dramatic. And two other things of note. Rich McKinnon, who is a longtime well-known person in Cambridge, who both helped with large developments and community engagement, and also had an office pretty high up above the Leechmere Steel, used to send out pictures. Unfortunately, he passed away about a month ago. But he had a terrific attitude his whole life, and he was very interested in it. There's also a quite accomplished still photographer who's part of East Cambridge planning team, who befriended the work crews at Leechmere specifically and took a lot of still photos. So that might be something to look forward to in the future. Any other public comments? Bonnie, do you want to say anything? At this point, you're muted, but if you want to say anything at any time, just let us know. I'm guessing that your travel this year is either to the North or South Pole. I think we all remember how good you were at taking interesting trips. Stefan, I think that's it for public comments.
Okay, cool. If there's time or interest later, maybe not even tonight, but I can share some of the pages from the Roll Sign magazine that Barry mentioned.
Oh, terrific.
I'm trying to do one more thing on YouTube to make sure that it goes properly from the Rock website to this live stream. But in the meantime, should we start off with the subcommittee reports?
Yeah, Brian has done a terrific job this year with agendas in Capitol. investment and finance, and it's a tough topic, but he's really been up to the task. Brian, do you want to give a short report?
Sure. I'll talk about our most recent capital investment and finance subcommittee. We met most recently last Tuesday. I see Stefan's got the agenda that we walked through up there. It was primarily focused on some of the recent FMCB actions at some recent meetings. There was the biggest action from a finance perspective was the forging ahead decision that was made to implement some service reductions in, I think, starting in January, and then I think some later ones in June or July. What I remember from our discussion is that obviously the potential infusion of federal money is out there, which I think could dwarf any potential savings from the service cuts. So it is kind of an interesting balance in terms of that. But at the same time, there are still limited resources, and the money that is coming in from the federal government, it may be the last time money's coming in, and the T does have an obligation to make that last accordingly, right? So I think from our perspective, the cuts were not as severe as kind of initially proposed. I think we do hope that they are temporary, but financially it does seem like directionally the right thing to do for the T. They did listen to some feedback, which is probably more on the operational side, but to look at cuts to frequency more than elimination of services. And that does seem to make sense with an eye towards getting a feedback signal of when to increase service when ridership does come back, hopefully in the near future. But for the time being, it hasn't. We did look at some of the other decks, which does show some of the earlier trends of ridership increasing through September. Once you start looking at October, November data, that does decrease. So that kind of steady rise, it has kind of turned around a little bit. So obviously, the T is in a tough spot. And I think they're in a lot better spot knowing that there is some federal money coming in. But with ridership where it's at, I think there are some actions that kind of need to be taken regardless, and trying to think about what's the right level of service to provide going forward and what's the best way to do that. So that was a bit of the forging ahead deck. We also talked about the advisory board report to the MBTA. That was Brian Kane and the group over at the advisory board did present a report, which I guess we probably should have talked about it first because it preceded the forging ahead discussion. But they did make a financial case to say, hey, like, you don't really need to cut service. There's other ways to do it. From a financial perspective, there's probably a better path forward. So I thought it was good from my perspective that the advisory board was coming up with a detailed plan, getting into kind of the nitty gritty of it. But I think ultimately the T did move forward with their projections.
I just want to jump in here, Brian.
Yep.
And say that it wasn't so much that they said that there were better ways to do it. They were saying that the deficit wasn't, that the T was being very conservative in its estimates of the deficit. So if the T assumed that there would be slightly higher ridership, and if the T assumed that they wouldn't have to spend as much on COVID protocols, cleaning and whatnot, that they wouldn't have as much of a deficit as they thought, and it would be small enough that it wouldn't need to do cuts.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Len. Yep.
Yeah, no problem.
So those were the two main things from the meeting highlights. There was also some good updates from the general manager. I think there's a discussion on the new Tobin bus lane, which is being, it's more from an operational perspective, but we do look at the meeting highlights there. So Len, anything else before I talk about the next two items that you want to highlight on FMCB meeting highlights that you had brought up?
No, thanks, Brian.
Okay. So then for the other piece of it, so means tested fares, we didn't get into too much discussion this month, but I did indicate to the group that I do want to focus on this for 2021 to try to get some more research. I think if I make it a singular focus, I may have more success than trying to kind of lump it in with other things. But we've talked before in subcommittee that it seems like something we want to recommend the T to do. I think there are different ways that we can do it, and probably some best practices that are out there in terms of operational, in terms of funding primarily, things like that. I think I've mentioned before, I really see an equity issue with the office worker who makes, call it $100,000 a year, is able to take a tax deduction for their T-Pass, and then somebody who's low income and doesn't get the same tax deduction and pays essentially a higher fare for their pass. So I see that as an inequality in the system, and perhaps mean tested fares is one way to help remedy that. So again, nothing really discussed this month, but I do want to try and make it a focus for 2021. And then the other piece was trying to come up with an agenda for 2021, which I think Wade mentioned that I tried to come up with something for 2020, and I think we are going to ask if Len can pick that back up for 2021, as I'm probably going to be out a bit of the year with a baby on the way in sometime in the spring. And I think that's what I have for my update. Len or anyone else who was there want to mention anything that we had discussed?
No, I think that was pretty good. Oh, I'm sorry, Len, go ahead.
No, that was pretty good. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Elf?
Yes, sir.
And okay, so marketing and operations, who's gonna speak to that?
Let me slide in my copious notes. And people will probably say that that's way too small of a font size, right? So let's...
What's a good eye test?
Yeah. Make that a notch up. There's the zoom control. Let's try that on for size, literally. All right. How's that working for folks for readability?
Okay.
All right. Our special guest was Ryan Caholen of MBTA Commuter Rail Operations. I don't think I have his title in here, but I believe he is the Director of Railroad Operations. In other words, he's the top man at the MBTA in charge of the commuter rail services, as opposed to people who actually work for Keolis. And it's a plug for the January meeting. We are expecting to have Linda Dillon of Keolis Customer Service, who's right-hand man of the general manager of Keolis, for the January public meeting. So this was a nice tie-in to be able to have Ryan from the MBTA. Talked quite a bit about the compliance for the mandated positive train control system, which is a federal mandate. And I was surprised that Ryan's report was that it is 100% in compliance. The mandate was met, and there is now, I believe he said as of mid-2020, yes, that's my highlight right here. As of August 31st, the requirements were met. There's still more work to be done in terms of implementing cab signals, which is an additional step beyond the positive train control requirements. Eventually, the goal is that throughout the MBTA service area, there'll be no more need, and there'll be no more wayside signals, as they're called, which are the signals that are the traditional railroad means of signaling, literally trains, which you see along the sides of the tracks. those will be eventually all retired in favor of cab signals, which is essentially the same thing as what's on the side of the tracks, but put into the cab. That's a separate but related project, but the positive train control, again, federal requirement, has been met. So that's huge. The MBTA was facing daily fines if that was not met. So it's huge that it's all set. For example, the variance allows cab signal to go until end of 2022 for that to be implemented. Also talked about the rehab overhauls of the F40 older locomotives, which, as he reported, are, even though $3 million per unit for the overhaul, that's less than half of the price of a brand new locomotive. And although I haven't had a chance to look into the difference between a tier 0 and a 0 plus, I don't know, Wig, did you happen to, or do you happen to know that rating? Okay. Well, I believe it's sort of similar to how gas burning automobiles can be referred to as a partial zero emissions vehicle, which means it's not zero, but it's better than your typical vehicle. So they call it a partial zero emissions. I believe the tier 0 plus is similar to that. In other words, the emissions from the locomotive are better than it had been, but still not as good as brand new out of the gate locomotive.
Is a 0 plus? I mean, is that equivalent of an F plus? I mean, if you're does it matter shades of gray if you're failing? I mean, are they trying to get credit for something that they're not succeeding at? Or?
More like an A minus.
Oh, so 0 is good.
I didn't think so. I thought
really?
I thought that tier 0 was basically the I want to say the worst that it could be and still be allowed to be operating. But you know what? I don't want to say that without having checked on it. I forgot and didn't have a chance. But that's a good follow-up item.
Yeah, it's not. So it's not an F. An F would be failing and would be taken off the rails. It's a 0 is a D, and a 0 plus would be a D plus. So that's good. Okay.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah, but again, it's
come to school.
Yeah, but it's not so much a measure of what a locomotive is doing at day to day or week to week. It's more like, what is the design specification for the amount of emissions? So whether or not it's meeting the spec is separate from what the specification is. Like all of our cars are getting emissions checked every 2 years to make sure they're in compliance, but the standard for each car, it's a different California spec versus Massachusetts. I think that's the rating, that's the tier, is what is it supposed to be, and then whether or not something, if it's not in compliance, gets pulled. I don't know if there's that, and that's a good follow-up. We know we've heard from Dave Carney and Bill Wolfgang in the past that buses are self-monitoring vehicles for their own emissions, and if there's a problem with I forget the exact term, but it's something like a catalytic converter on the very last phase of the diesel bus exhaust. It's some kind of a high temperature thing that's supposed to burn any larger particles. I see you nodding, Wig, which is very reassuring to me. I know that Dave Carney and or Bill Wolfgang have said that if a bus has a fault with that system, it'll actually throw a light on the back corner of the bus near the tailpipe or the tail stack, indicating that it needs service. I'm pretty sure locomotives will actually call that into the maintenance facility automatically. But moving on to more of the notes, I thought it was interesting, personally, I thought it was interesting that the prime mover, which is the main diesel burning, energy creating, motion energy creating unit in the locomotives is not being replaced. So the work that's being done on these F40 locomotives is significant, including body panels, including all new electronics. It's going from, as I mentioned here, it's going from what had been solid state, but not necessarily computerized, to all microcontroller state-of-the-art control systems for better intelligence, better management. I believe that also means better fault recovery. But the actual engine inside the locomotive is still the same unit. And Ryan said that's deliberate because not only is it a cost they don't want to incur to go out and buy a whole new engine to go inside the locomotive, but the engines, the piston, the crankcase, all the parts that make up that diesel burning engine are time tested, and they don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater kind of thing. So that's why they do keep the original engines, and everything is just rebuilt. Also interesting that according to federal safety regulations, the F40s, which are the solid side panels, don't have any steps on them, can't be used for switching. I don't know if you've seen the type of locomotive called the GP40, which was the one that had the problem with the sand dust, the silica dust getting into the cab of the locomotive and causing potential health issues for engineers. We talked about this, I think it was a year ago. Yeah, starting last winter and into January, February last year. Those problem locomotives are the GP40s. They have essentially a sidestep. So a crewman crew person can be outside, which is important for switching operations through a yard. So the F40s need to be more, I want to say, solid and reliable, because they are the ones that are always going to be out on the line hauling the passenger coaches, because they can't be used for switching operations in the yards. I'm going to jump ahead. Did I take the note about the reliability? No, I didn't take a note on that, but Ryan told us that the reliability so far has been an absolutely tremendous improvement. So they're definitely getting a huge improvement in the mean time between failures, or the number of miles between a problem on these rebuilt units. And it's also worth mentioning that if you look at any roster of the T equipment, you can tell the old ones from the new ones, because the rebuild is actually getting this new classification of 3C. So previously, I believe Ryan said they were considered F42C. Now they're actually being reclassified as a 3C because of all the increased microcontrollers, electronics, etc. Going ahead here, talked about coach rebuilds, and this is big news because CTC, by the way, is control trailer coach. That's that's the full name for basically a railroad car that carries passengers and has the cab up at the front for the engineer. So on every MBTA commuter rail train, there's the engineer's spot in the locomotive, obviously, which goes in one direction. And then when they go the other direction, there's the CTC, the control trailer coach or cab car on the other side. The fact that the 1500s and 1600s are going to be all retired is big, because they have really been showing their age, and it's been tough to keep those going. So the rebuilds that's mentioned here is the double-decker Hyundai Rotem cars. It's almost hard to believe that we've had the Hyundai Rotem double-decker coaches they've been around for long enough that they actually need a rebuild, a midlife rebuild already. It seems like it was not that long ago that the Rider Oversight Committee was invited to tour the first demonstration mock-up of the Hyundai Rotem double-deckers. but nope, it's been long enough. They're already getting overhauls. The mention of the rebuilt F40 or an HSP 46, which is the other type of locomotive that's in the top of the line condition in the fleet, is gonna that's worth also calling out, because this is going to mean a huge increase in overall reliability, because we'll have power on one end that's basically new or as good as new, and then once the overhauls are done, then the cab car on the other end will also be recently overhauled. So the ends of the commuter rail trains that make the most difference, where you've got the controlling, the engineers' controls, are going to be as good as new on every set once the rebuilds of the locomotives are done, once the rebuilds of the double-decker control cabs are done. We talked about passenger counters. 83 passenger counter coaches is much more than I thought it was. I thought we were still down in the 45 to 50 coaches range. The automatic passenger counters in the commuter rail is the system that uses video analysis to detect someone who's a passenger or a conductor going from one coach to another, and not counting them as a new board or a disembark if they're just going between coaches. But if it is someone who's coming in the door or going out, it counts them as boarding or disembarking, again, all by video analysis. So again, 83 coaches having those passenger counters is huge, because it allows for more accurate number counts. So we're not relying on the old method of the conductors trying to do their jobs of running a train safely and collecting fares, while also trying to count the number of passengers. Ryan mentioned that the delays in getting the passenger counters implemented are almost entirely because of supply chain, meaning problems at factories and getting the parts, and it's all entirely pandemic-related slowdowns, but it's still an active project. And Ryan also told us that as the Hyundai Rotem double-deckers are getting overhauled, the passenger counter equipment is being sent in whatever numbers are available for the APC equipment to the location where the coaches are being rebuilt. So it's not like they're waiting around to get a newly rebuilt double-decker coach back and then putting in the passenger counter equipment. They're doing it while it's being overhauled.
Of course, now they can just
Streamlining
use,
there.
of course, now they can just use their fingers, right, on their hands. Yeah.
This is
Yeah, I have to agree. Yeah, you're right. I've talked to a couple friends of mine who are commuter rail conductors, and they've talked about, oh yeah, both people on this trip were able to stay distant. I mean, it's not that bad. It's not literally both people, but it's pretty low. Yeah. At the Forging Ahead meetings, they talked about the commuter rail recovery and in ridership has been the lowest of any mode in the entire system. The other big news from Ryan was that the sleep apnea program completed with 100% of all commuter rail engineers having been screened. And of, I think he said, did he say there was 80 engineers? Don't quote me on that, but out of the dozens and dozens and dozens of commuter rail engineers, only one expressed any initial reluctance to go through the screening process, but partly as a result of Keolis framing that apnea screening program as a health and welfare improvement program, not just for safety, but also as a goal to help the engineers be more healthy. That one person who had expressed some concern did go through the program. Ryan said there was a little bit of a carrot and stick, that it was mandated, and Keolis told the engineers, if you don't get an apnea screening, you will have your operating license revoked. But Ryan said that the focus was on improving quality of life. Ryan himself mentioned that being a railroad engineer means you are essentially sitting and you're not active for huge amounts of your day, and there's a prevalence for I won't say obesity, but it's very difficult for engineers to get a lot of exercise, and so framing the apnea screening as a way of improving their health apparently worked very well in getting everyone on board. Play on words intended. The North Station drawbridge and the signal project is, oh, someone remind me, did he say that it's 25% design phase or further along? I forget what. I'll share out the slides on that he gave us, but unlike the current drawbridges at North Station, of which there are only 2 movable spans, and they both raise and lower. They can be independent, but of course, well, why raise them independently? Because if you're going to let a boat go, you've got to have both of them go. Both have to go up. But instead of the current 2 drawbridge spans, each of which has only 2 tracks on it, the new drawbridges are going to be a total of 3 spans, each with 2 tracks. So it's going to be a 50% increase in the potential throughput from the lines that feed into North Station into the platform areas. It's been said for a long time. I mean, it's been decades that various commuter rail operators, Keolis, MBCR before them, even Amtrak before them, were saying that, wow, these 2 drawbridges at North Station with a total of only 4 tracks is a real operational problem. So it's going to be, when this project gets underway to replace those drawbridges, again, we're going to go from 4 tracks to 6. It's going to be a huge, very noticeable improvement in the flexibility that that Keolis or whoever is the future operator has in being able to develop schedules, and likely also the on-time performance will improve. That's the end of my notes from Ryan. Before I go on, any other comments on all of that? I know it was a lot and I was talking a lot, but very important stuff that we learned from Ryan. I wanted to give it the thoroughness that I thought it needed.
Hey, Stefan, this is Bonnie. Hey, I have a quick question. So, I worked in sleep medicine over at the Brigham for 8 years. I was just curious, I was looking at the link that you had sent to the sleep apnea information, but I couldn't find who conducted that. Like, who did that? Or did they go to their own physicians? Do we know? I was just curious.
I think it was an organized program, but that's just my sense.
Yeah.
Well, if you give me 30 seconds, I can pull up the slides from Ryan.
Yeah, because, in the past, there's been incidences where conductors, and I'm sure everybody on this call knows, have fallen asleep, not in Massachusetts, here, but in other parts of the country.
Yeah, he did a great job of describing the propensity for this.
Yeah.
And the need to be on top of it.
Yeah, and be aware of it. Yeah,
Yep.
They screen all the truck drivers, the pilots, everybody.
Well, I'd ask the question, Bonnie. I mean, if there are other causes, for the inability to stay awake other than sleep apnea. Do you know anything about that?
No.
All right.
Like narcolepsy or something? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking narcolepsy, but also,
Yeah.
yeah, and well, I mean, the obvious one would be just not getting enough sleep. But,
Yeah. Yeah, and people that have, severe sleep apnea don't sleep. They think they do, but they don't. And then, then they're just tired during the day.
Yeah.
And like Stefan was saying, then they're sitting for long periods of time, and it's easy to nod off and fall asleep.
Yep.
I think that was our one. It's a really good story.
Yeah.
It's great that they got everybody through the program. I think our only pushback from an oversight perspective was, let's not tout this as we've cured all sleep problems and magically no other. no train driver is ever going to come to work tired or distracted, and we've solved it.
Yeah.
But this is an important step, and it's a good victory to celebrate. But there's more work to be done, and there's more causes that should be acknowledged and tackled in the same way with the same level of diligence and program, that maybe rather than just declaring victory here that we've solved sleep issues on or distraction issues on the train.
Yeah, I don't think you ever solve it, but it's just, bringing it to light and bringing awareness and making people aware that there are issues. And then also, some of these conductors work round the clock and they work different shifts. And so, it's really difficult if you work overnight, especially now with the holidays, to come home and all the kids are homeschooling, to try and sleep during the day, becomes difficult. So,
Yeah,
but anyway,
very
no,
well
that's
said.
all. Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the sleep apnea.
Yep. And I just discovered why I couldn't find a slide that Ryan had presented. He didn't present one. We talked about it in the subcommittee meeting, but the slides that he showed were focusing on the positive train control.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through all the details, but I'll just put it up so it's on the recording for the record. They also talked about ATC. This is what the ATC signal unit in the control cab looks like. Again, these are slides from Ryan Caholen for Commuter Rail. There's the talk about the F43C. This is one of the first that rolled off the line. There's the figure that I wanted to share with you. Yeah, so 40,000 miles between failures, and that's 4 times better than before the overhaul, and that's even twice as good as the current HSP 46s, which are basically brand new 2 years ago. So these overhauled units are rock stars right now in the fleet. And here's the sort of before conditions, just rust. And here's the after. And then very quickly, also show these are the coaches that are being overhauled. End of mid 2022, and again, there's top to bottom overhaul work, so they'll last for another generation. I've talked about the railroad bridge project previously at other ROC meetings, so I'm not going to go into any details here, but I did attend 2/3 of these, culminating with the High Line Bridge project. This is not what we talked about during the subcommittee. I was going to mention it because Ryan talked about the railroad bridge projects. The Lowell Line, High Line Bridge project is going to be built. It's going to be redone to the side of the current bridge. So there's expected to be 0 impact on the Lowell Line service because they're going to keep trains running over the current High Line Bridge, which is right near the Boston Engine Terminal, by the way. You can see it if you go by on the Fitchburg line or the Newburyport-Rockport line. Certainly, if you go over the Lowell line, you're going through that bridge. But the new High Line Bridge, we put up right next to it, and then when it's all ready, they just cut it over. No interruptions. That's huge. Okay, I'll try to zoom through the rest of this. As mentioned here, we did have a longer discussion about sleep issues. I think it was Jonathan brought up that the fatal collision where the operator of a Green Line train tragically died was attributed to sleep apnea causing microsleep incident. Apparently, the woman fell asleep behind the controls. Very sad. There were many injuries, so it's the kind of thing that is unlikely to be addressed by technology on the Green Line, simply because the cost would be, it's an unaffordable cost. It was judged on the Green Line. So the best that they can do on Green Line is apnea screening. And again, as I took the note here, nationwide attention is being given to transit operators and sleep issues. I'll just blow through these other points. Better here. Yeah, so the question of equity versus cost was a big topic of discussion. The case in point, the Fall River, New Bedford, being used as a case for Not necessarily saying that it shouldn't be done, but certainly to analyze it closely. The costs to restore passenger service to Fall River, New Bedford are significant, with an unknown amount of ridership. I mean, of course, one can't know ridership on a line that doesn't currently have service, but it's something to be watched. And we also talked about, could there be ways of performing? Actually, was it in the capital committee where we talked about? I don't want to mix up the two meetings. Were we talking in capital or marketing operations about incentives by municipalities, as like just trying to strategize ways to encourage ridership on lines like Fall River, New Bedford once it opens? By perhaps can Fall River, New Bedford do a municipal tax credit to people? Was that, which committee was that?
I remember that. Yeah, that was in CIF.
Okay.
And it was more off the cuff too, but yeah. Don't want people to think that we were seriously. So just off the cuff.
Right. Oh yes, yes. I think it was my sort of question to the rest of you folks about, is that something that could even be done? Not that we should. No, I agree. Jonathan pointed out that train service to Springfield, back and forth from New York, is there because the demand is there. The demand does drive the quality of the level of the service, although they're separated sometimes by decades. I don't think there's any more call out to be, unless any of you folks who were also at that subcommittee want to say more about this.
If I may ask a question.
Yep, go ahead, Barry.
The early F-40s, were known as the Screamers, were taken out of service. I'm told that they are being stored in Rochester, Mass, unused. Any thoughts of rebuilding them the same way?
I don't believe there's any plan to overhaul any more than this current project number of, not that one. What's the total? Of 37. Yeah, I believe after this 37 are overhauled, that's it. And any beyond that are just going to be, I don't want to say written off, but decommissioned. You other folks who were at that meeting with Ryan, is that about what you heard as well?
Yeah, thank you for the report. I mean, we've had some great guests, and these are things that many of us don't appreciate. So it's good to hear about it from time to time.
Yeah.
Also,
unless there's any other. Oh, sorry. Wait, go ahead.
I have to admit, for the record, that you completely fooled me with the PZEV zero emission car comparison, and I appreciate Craig's cheerful cynicism piercing through my my overactive faith.
Yeah, I definitely owe you all a little investigation for next month on that 0+.
No, I think Craig probably got it right, and wishful thinking on my part. We're a little
Any
bit
other questions
ahead.
for the subcommittee?
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we move on, is there anything else that anyone wanted to ask about the marketing operations communications?
Stefan, you mentioned that you wanted to send this. For some reason, I don't have the slides for that meeting right yet.
Yes, I don't think I got the updated one that Ryan actually showed. You're right. Thank you. I apologize that I didn't send it out. The shots that I was showing were actually screen grabs when Ryan was doing the presentation. He had said that he was going to send an updated version, and I didn't follow up on that. But I do have a preliminary version, which was not exactly what he showed during the meeting. So I can send something, but I'll ask Ryan again if he can send me the final draft, final version that he showed. Thanks for that reminder.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So Stefan, you all set?
Unless there's any more questions, yeah, that's the report from that subcommittee.
So the next item, I think, is one that Len contributed. Len, do you want to start the discussion of that, the Transit Matters?
Yeah, so a guy from Transit Matters got in touch with me and asked if we would sign on, to this proposal. And so I told him that they don't need us to do that. That the MPO, in particular Sandy Johnson, who is in charge of the UPWP program, that's the Unified Planning Work Program, will accept suggestions from an individual, any group, but nonetheless, they would like it if we would say that we endorse this proposal. I mean, I looked at it; it's good. It's reasonable. I mean, I hope those of you who have had a chance to, who got it, had a chance to take a look at it. I would endorse it. So.
Yeah, it's quite short. Jacob, do you want to say anything about it? I know you're interested in sustainability of the bus system. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it.
I did. It's very short. It's only a page long, so
right.
it was harder to not read it, honestly. It's most of the stuff that I've sort of gone to a lot of Transit Matters events and sort of followed their Twitter pages and such like that. It's what they've been recommending. They talk a lot about not just sort of bus electrification with batteries, but they're also encouraging the T to look at in-motion charging of battery buses and even full wires on some routes, especially now that, just for reference, it's easier to buy the kind of trolley buses that the T has, the new flyer trolley buses, with several miles of off-wire capability than it is without them. Like there's basically just sort of empty space in the buses that could have supercapacitors in them. So if we were to order any more of those, they would have several miles at least of off-range, off-wire, even without batteries or in-motion charging or anything expensive like that. Overall, this report looks great. I would feel comfortable with the committee endorsing it, and I'd encourage you all to take a look at it and see what you think.
You would expect it to be short. In fact, this is kind of longer than a lot of ideas that people give them. You're not really expected when you are proposing an idea, to have a multi-page, detailed outline of what the study would do. If you did, that's fine. But if you don't, that's perfectly okay too.
Yeah, and Len really knows this well because of his involvement in the MPO meetings. But there's three certification and basically federal processes that the MPO has to pay attention to, and the UPWP is the one really that's not so constrained. It's basically a list of studies that different sponsors believe would be helpful to do for the benefit of surface transportation in the region. And then folks like Emily and her colleagues go off and figure out how to do the chosen studies each year. So they're a little bit more free-form than most of what the MPO does, which is really more rigorous, short and long-range, larger projects and plans.
Yeah, and I guess I will just add that I think there's maybe 2 or 3 more steps in the process if the study were to be selected and move forward, where it would get defined and tweaked and made sure that it'd be something that we could accomplish and would provide value. So it's in initial phases, which is where it should be right now, and it looks like it should.
Yeah, one of the nice things about the UPWP is it's a lot less constrained, so you can really be a little bit imaginative, and as long as it's thought to be worthwhile, there's a chance that a study gets done may affect long-range directions that are taken within the region.
So just to follow up on that, and I guess, Emily, this is a question for you. The way this letter is written, even though it's short, it's kind of covering up some broad swaths here. It's saying we want an examination of technology. We want to know everything that's out there in terms of next generation buses. We want to look at all of the infrastructure, and then we want to do a cost model here too. So there's multiple. And I guess looking at routes as well. That you could argue that each one of those is its own study, right? And to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Like, is looking at the bus technology and what's available, is that what CTPS would do, or would CTPS be more focused on where it would be best applicable to the routes? I guess I'm trying to understand if I have a criticism of the letter, I want everything in the kitchen sink on buses, as opposed to kind of maybe a more targeted focus on one thing or another.
Well, phrased that way, Craig, now I don't think I even want it. I'm kidding.
Well, I hear you. And I think kind of what I was trying to speak to before is that it will go through a process. The UPWP has a committee that meets to discuss transportation. And I should know a little bit more about its definition, but it's composed of people who will be able to propose ways to tailor this to be a little bit more effective. To that end, that shouldn't stop you from expressing that right now. That is a concern that I had when I looked at it. I say knowing that I'm being recorded. And I guess
see, Len, she has the same concern I have. You're laughing at me, but
something to look at is the future of the curb. First phase of the study was more of a summative comparative report about how different cities and towns across the country are approaching curb space. And that was a little bit more of a broad strokes comparison. And now we're in phase 2, where we're applying that to the Boston region and coming out with a guidebook. So it could be first steps to a longer process, and that could be refined further and given more strict definitions for what results are along the way. That said, if you have ideas for what those results that you want to see are, there is space to express that and make your own comment too. Does that sound fair?
So I guess looking at the past though, like has CTPS ever commented before on saying use this technology for a vehicle versus not this technology, or this is education for me in terms of what you guys cover and don't cover?
Not that I'm aware of. And that's the kind of question I would ask Jonathan, and he would have an opinion. But we don't have purchase power, I guess. We only have the power to analyze and sort of come out with studies and recommendations, which is what the guidebooks end up being. And they're nice because our guidebooks intended to appeal to the whole region. So where the city of Boston might care about one thing, we could go and interview many people, which is what we're doing for Future the Curb, which I know is not electrification, and that might have very different concerns attached to it. Yeah, so it's not, it would be more for edification and to study something, which could then be further articulated. We can't, I think there's only so much tooth that our words have, as far as I understand.
Yeah,
but this is
very wrong there too, if I am.
This is an opportunity for people interested in surface transportation to ask a really good technical staff to look into an area and see if there's something there that's worth pursuing in this region, and maybe to winnow it down as well to what things are just fanciful and what things actually may be being done better, or maybe represent a more interesting way to go in the future in this region. So
yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think I just see it, and I don't think it necessarily means I wouldn't sign on to the letter, but I think I see it as two different studies. I see there's a technology study that I'd want to see come out of engineering or procurement or Bill Wiflong's organization, saying, you know, like, we want you to come up with a recommendation of what technologies you feel comfortable with. And then I see a kind of an application study to say, okay, what's our opportunity set to roll this out? Could we roll it out on every route? Could we roll it out only on some routes that are shorter? Do we have to look at, you know, are there certain hills that we'd want to avoid and say certain routes couldn't go up certain hills? So I feel like there's two bodies of work there. There's examining the world of technology, which is a whole effort in itself. And to a certain degree, I think we've been doing that, right? There are pilots. We've had pilots. It's kind of expanding the work that's already been done into a more formalized recommendation of, you know, these are the things we feel comfortable with. And then there is okay, CTPS, what's the best way to apply this? How do we, you know, like, what's our opportunity set in how could we do a phased roll in? And so that's just how I would handle it. But doesn't mean you necessarily we have to challenge the letter and how it's written.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that they'll take a look at. I mean, as Emily said, I mean, they'll determine, I mean, how to scope out the study and whether to do iteratively, you know, as she mentioned, with the future of the curb. And so I'm glad to see them thinking this way, and I'm happy they reached out to us. I mean, and as I said, I made it clear to them that they didn't have to. And I wasn't really trying to discourage them. I was just really trying to let them know that they didn't have to wait for us. I mean, and also, I mean, I think it's important, I mean, for people to know that they have the power themselves to make these requests. But it's great for them to bring things like this to our attention. It gets us thinking about it, and if anything, I hadn't thought to ask the group about the UPWT studies because they came to our TAC and we talked a lot about it, and I just forgot. You know, in the past I've asked us to chime in, and I just forgot this year.
Yeah, and that's fine. And the other thing that's interesting about this is it's Transit Matters, and they have some quite bright young people who are really interested in the future of service transportation. And so paying a little bit of attention to what they're thinking about from time to time is probably broadening for us. You know, because we pay attention to a lot of real nuts and bolts most of the time. Okay.
One quick thing. I don't want to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Len. I'm sorry, I was cutting you off, Len.
I was gonna Robert's rule this thing, but if you don't feel it's necessary, that's fine.
Well, I was going to ask one clarifying question, because I think I'm having a brain failure about. I heard the word curb a couple times, and I think it was while I was pulling up my very slow computer to show this letter. Did I hear that right? It was curb, and we're talking about the curb as in
Yes,
along a roadway.
Yeah, we're currently in Future of the Curb, FOTC Phase 2, which is a guidebook about curb space, and we're looking into quick build bike lanes, parklets, different ways of partitioning out curb space that's not just used for parking, and we're studying that across the region.
That is really great. Okay, as a tie-in to my own home municipality there, and then my ears perked up when I heard curb, because one of the single biggest issues right now to be worked out, I believe it's still to be worked out, I should double check, is the proposed express bus layout for Western Avenue through Lynn, which has been a big point of congestion for, I think, Emily, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is it 8 different bus routes that travel along that stretch of Western Avenue?
Map, but I'm sure you're.
Yeah, but it's a tremendous number of routes that all converge on this. I think it's a 1 mile stretch, or maybe a little less than 1 mile, from the edge of Lynn at the Saugus River up to basically just the western end of Lynn Common. And the biggest outcry or uproar about the project has been what happened to local businesses when the parking that is heavily utilized along this bus corridor gets pushed into side streets. So the curbside issues for planning really hits home for me being a Lynn resident. And there was also similar curb issues with making a Northern Strand bike trail along with a bus lane along the common area, which was less of an issue because there's hardly any businesses along Lynn Common, and it's already been laid down. I haven't heard any results yet, but the express bus lane past Lynn Common is already in place with striping and the red sort of a rug type of a paint treatment, and the Northern Strand bike trail on the southern side. So it's happening. So Emily, if I can, if you can feed me Lynn specific stuff as it happens, and I can also put you. I mean, if there's any kind of a communication gap between Lynn and CTPS or MBTA, I can help with that because I know half of the city council. Literally, I know them. In case it ever helps.
We're rounding up interview contacts right now, and then in the new year we'll be conducting interviews and putting together a book.
Let me know if I can help.
Definitely.
Well,
yeah, thanks for that clarification.
You should check out the first Future of the Curb study. Andrew Clark, I think was his name. The guy who was previously on one of the liaisons from CTPS. He did that study, and Lynn was not one of the 4 places that was studied. I mean, Arlington was. I think they're going to do maybe a few more places in preparation for Future of the Curb too. But one of the take-homes from that was that the businesses benefit less than they think from parking on the curb.
So there's some crossover with CBDs, central business districts, which was in one of Andrew's studies, and I think that was where he focused on that. So there's 2 studies: Future of the Curb and central business districts, and then CBDs also is going to have a phase 2 that's going to go before the MPO board in January.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Guessing this must be it.
But I think this.
That is phase 1, I think.
And then, as you said, I mean, there's one on CBDs. So what was that one called?
Central business districts. We call it CBDs, and I always think of what else CBD can stand for. I believe it was the central business district.
Yeah. So those were both good in terms of telling you how the curb first is underutilized when it's used only for parking, and there was some nice math that went behind that. And the one with the CBDs was that people actually come to businesses via car less than businesses think they do, and so they're going to fight you when you want to take away the parking space, but you can feel pretty confident that you're not going to ruin their business. If people don't get to park, and now there weren't a whole lot of places that were studied, and one of the reasons is surprisingly, and I'm not being sarcastic, is that when CTPS reaches out to municipalities asking them to be part of these studies, most of them don't respond. They just don't get any response back from the towns, and they can't go and do the studies without support from the town. So I don't know if Lynn was one of those places that didn't respond, but maybe when they reach out to Lynn, they should CC you, Stefan.
Oh yeah, please, yeah. I think Emily double-checked me. That must be it, right?
That looks like it, yeah.
Okay.
I think there's a memo somewhere, which is what I've consulted.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, as long as I'm not putting incorrect or completely incorrect links in. Yeah. Absolutely.
And just one historic footnote here. Some of these battles can be pretty significant. When they were discussing which Green Line branches to consider, Karen will remember that one of them was in her direction, and that possibility was completely killed by small businesses that didn't want to give up curb space. So they cut off the discussion about whether there should be a Green Line branch restoration. And Boston City Hall went along with that sentiment. So it just never even got pushed to a serious study. Well, we're just about on time. If folks don't have more on this, next agenda item is elections.
So are we feeling the need to vote on this, or we're just going to take it that the group wants to sign off on it without a vote?
What do you suggest, Len?
It seems like there are no objections to signing off on this, but I mean, do we want to have it on record?
Well, pardon me, just because Karen, being a voting member, hasn't spoken up or asked anything, let me just call out to Karen specifically. Karen, I don't know if you had a chance to see this. I don't think it went out to the full committee mailing list before this morning when I sent it. Apologies if we're wanting to vote on something and you're not prepared. We can certainly put off a vote if you want, but we could also read it to you because it's not that long, or we can just summarize it. What do you think, Karen?
Just summarize it.
I'll let somebody else because I haven't literally read it word by word. Len, would you want to just summarize it for Karen for the purposes of being able to vote?
It's been a little while since I've read it,
or
I
anyone
can't really see it that well. I mean, essentially studying the electrification of buses. And when we were discussing it, we pretty much discussed what the letter was about. So
sounds fine to me.
And aren't these? I mean, when I mailed these out, to James, which posts them to the Rock's website. So at that point, I get them posted in the amount of time that's required for open meeting laws. So that's the place to go to check for the agenda. And anything that's going to be discussed at the meeting.
And this one is quite short too. So.
Okay, so I guess Karen, do you feel comfortable on participating in a vote?
Yes.
I'll make a motion. Go ahead, Karen, say it again.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure you heard me.
Oh yeah, yep, thanks. So I'll make a motion to express, to take a vote for support, in support of this Transit Matters proposal letter. I'm not sure if that's...
I'll second that motion, Stefan.
Then let's take, just go for consensus. All in favor of expressing support for this Transit Matters proposal letter, say aye.
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 Any those against, say nay. Unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone.
There'll be the abstains. Maybe Craig wants to abstain.
Any abstentions?
No, I voted yes.
Oh.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And thanks, Len. I don't think I mentioned anything earlier. Thanks for bringing this to the attention of the Rock. I do think studies like this are things that I think it's good for Transit Matters to recommend, but obviously I think it would be good for the Rock to recommend as well. So just as we think forward, this is something I would like to get more involved with going forward if we can, but obviously I haven't done anything personally, but I'm in favor of this general activity.
Well, we still can. So
of course, yeah.
So one of the reasons I forgot to bring it up was that I'm representing the Rock on RTAC, and so Sandy came to RTAC and we gave him a bunch of ideas. And so I just for me at that point, I kind of put UPWP as that's done. And in the past, when we weren't part of RTAC, we make our own recommendations. So it wasn't that I was negligent. It was more that I was absent-minded with respect to bringing it up to the group here and find out if there are additional ideas. So, but knowing that you're more keenly interested, Mr. Langevin, I will make sure to put that in down for October in 2021.
Sounds good.
All right.
Well, and we might consider, Len, you would know better than others because of your participation, but we might consider having someone like Sandy come to one of our meetings and maybe briefly go through proposals that you or Sandy think we might be interested in that are in the UPWP. mean, this was an interesting exercise in that direction today, because I don't really think we've done it much in the past.
Well, we've written letters of support for the proposals. And I don't know if we did last year. I mean, and we usually will write a letter, I mean, in support of the tip, I mean, and or the UPWP.
Right.
I mean, and certainly when the LRTP comes out, we support that. It's every 4 or 5 years, every 4 years. You know.
Yep.
I mean, so when the proposal comes out, I mean, for the universe, I mean, we are asked to rank it as members of the MPO, and I could ask Sandy at that point to come and talk with us, and we can then go through exercise of ranking it as the rock, and then I would just pass along the summary of those rankings, I mean, as my ranking as representative of the rock on our tax. So
Yep.
if I'm hearing that you want that, so I'll do that. I'll put that down.
Well,
For,
I'm
fine.
Sorry to interrupt.
I'm fine. No, I was just saying I'm fine with it. Go ahead.
I went to 10 years of MPO meetings when the Green Line was kind of up in the air. But once it got on track, I really haven't paid much attention at all. Just, maybe once every 2 years or something, there'll be a big issue that I'll weigh in on. So I think we appreciate your participation in these broader processes, because you're in a position to, keep us a little bit in touch with it. And of course, Emily and the folks that attend meetings are as well. So I think that's helpful to us because the whole context is important.
And the minutia is too. The details are so.
Yep.
So there often aren't those big, controversial issues. But CTPS does a lot of good work. And,
Yep.
Almost every meeting they're releasing some kind of report. And when you really take the time to read them, you learn a lot. So.
Yep. Completely agree.
I will also plug that the meetings are available on YouTube, the MPO meetings, if that's of interest.
Excellent.
They're virtual right now, so they're on Zoom, and it's all recorded and uploaded in the same day.
That's great. I'll see if I can dig up a link without getting too distracted doing
It's on the YouTube channel. So yeah, it's on YouTube, as she said. Yeah.
So I think the next thing was election of co-chairs.
You want to lead that, Wig?
Not really.
Bonnie? Bonnie? Are you still there, Bonnie?
Oh, Bonnie put in chat she had to sign off to go to another event.
She got away.
Wait, just before I post it, let me just double check. Is this looking like the correct channel? It certainly seems like it.
That's it.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for that confirmation. I hate posting incorrect links on something that saves it forever.
I think personally that the two gentlemen who are running today's meeting are doing a stand-up job, and I would advocate for them to continue doing that fantastic stand-up job. That is my vote.
That's mine also.
I think you could do better though, Craig. You want to go for it? You're just running away. I hear you running away.
I think I don't know if it's in Robert's rules or whatever, but do we need to have a motion to nominate people, or does someone just say, I nominate so-and-so for another term as co-chair?
You should do a motion in a second.
I motion Stefan to do another turn as co-chair.
Can I second that motion that involves me? I don't think so.
No, the chair shouldn't second or even make a motion. Right.
I can second that motion.
So
you want to do one at a time here?
Let's do them individually, yes.
So the chair now does a vote.
All right, I'll call in the order on my Zoom window. Yeah, I'm not going to call on myself or Wig for if Wig is nominated again. So let's call on
you can vote for yourselves.
again. Is that?
You can vote for yourselves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All righty.
You just
So
can't
I'm
make
going
the
to go.
motion.
I'll call people in order. There's been a motion and a second to reappoint me as co-chair for another 6 months. Brian, yay or nay?
Yay.
I vote yay for myself. Wig?
Yay for you.
Jacob?
Yay.
Craig?
Yay for me.
Len?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Unanimous approval for me as another 6 months co-chair. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think I can make a motion to nominate Wig.
Not as a chair.
No?
Not as a
Not the chair? Not even for a co-chair? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you did it on one of the, you did it on the letter. I didn't call you on the letter, but just if you're asking, the chair can't make the motion or second the motion. Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
It says you are
So,
co-chairs. You're both in the same situation. So.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for another member of the committee to nominate or make a motion to nominate another co-chair for another 6 months.
I'll nominate.
nominate.
Wig.
I'll second it.
Can you say again what the motion in the second was to nominate whom?
Wig.
Got it. So I will call on members of the committee to vote yay or nay in favor or against Wig Zamor for another 6 month term as co-chair of the Rider Oversight Committee. Brian?
Yay.
I vote yay myself. Wig?
Yes.
Jacob?
Yes.
Craig?
I was waiting for Wig to vote first. It was a qualified yes, but he did vote yes. So as long as Wig voted yes and he's comfortable, I'm a yes.
Len?
I can't get myself to yes, but I'm not going to be a Grinch like I was last time, so I'm going to abstain this time.
Okay. And Karen?
Yes.
That's 6 yes and 1 abstention. Congratulations, Wig. You're co-chair of the Rider Oversight Committee for another 6 month term.
Well, I have a partner who does a huge amount of work in this, so I appreciate that, Stefan.
My great pleasure. I am, if nothing else, I am the man with all of the tools and toys.
It's a great shot.
Yeah, it's very fun. And if I want, I can talk to you over here too. Hey.
Yeah. Where?
I miss having you guys all in person at the conference room where I could do, live multi-camera stuff, but we'll get back there soon enough.
Yeah. Well, we should definitely explore options for remote. I guess we're probably more in a position to do remote interaction than a lot of other committees and boards that I belong to that are going to have to really do some adaptation to keep the remote access. I mean, once we are in a position where we can meet in person.
And
again.
for what it's worth, I am willing to explore a personal purchase for the ROC use of some video conferencing equipment that would interface with Zoom in some way. I mean, what that would be, I haven't looked yet, but I still have James's speakerphone from the days when he would allow telephone call in, which I think I never tried because it was just too much equipment, on top of multiple cameras and my laptop and everything. But in an era of Zoom, I'm gonna bet there's a way of putting a second screen of some kind in the conference room. Or just by the time we get there, there might even be a Zoom screen installed in the main conference room at 10 Park Plaza for all we know.
Yeah, or you could just project Zoom, and then if someone's going to do a projection, do a presentation. I think the hard part would just be figuring out if they can. Yeah, they should just be able to log into Zoom and do their presentation on Zoom, and you're now projecting Zoom on the screen, and so you get to see the participants on the screen whenever their presentation is going through Zoom on the screen, and then those of us in the room are just looking at the screen. And so the disadvantage for the people doing Zoom is that they can't necessarily see us because there's a camera on us. But then if we wanted to provide that, we could. But that would just be kind of like the downside to them not being in the room, and that's okay. They get to hear us. As long as they get to hear us, that's fine. And because the audio,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I was thinking in terms of needing a second thing to do a projection as well as me like managing the Zoom and like recording in the stream and everything. But you're right; it doesn't have to be separate.
it doesn't
So,
have
yeah,
to be like
I'm going to ponder this.
it doesn't have to be like your cockpit there that has like 100 screens in it. I'm sorry, I was being like Craig there. That has like 5 screens in it.
So we started to make some inquiries into kind of our own Zoom. Have we got any feedback on that?
I have not seen anything yet, but I will double check email. I would not be surprised if MassDOT is unable to provide any resources to us because we're not direct employees of MassDOT or MBTA. I mean, we are considered special state employees, but since we're not actual employees, we might not be able to use resources. I'm not sure.
I'm not so sure about that.
So you didn't get a response from the person you reached out to, Stefan?
I'm going to double check right now without taking too long to do it.
Yeah, we can follow up at another time too. But as I think a number of you know, I've been on the Logan and Massport CACs for a long time, and they're also considered a state agency. And they get a couple $100,000 of support every year directly from Massport. So, and in general, we have a more cordial relationship, I think, with the people at the State Transportation Building with whom we interact.
Yeah, I think the only line item for anything associated with us is through the MPO, and it's for CTPS's time.
Right. Yeah.
So that's the only source of funds. Earlier on, I did see a line item in the MBTA's budget for us, and then that went away. And I couldn't find it until it then popped up as part of CTPS, and that's for their time. And it's not necessarily for equipment, but I will ask someone at CTPS if maybe they can help us out here, and so I'll start with either Tegan, the executive director for the MPO, or Matt Archer, who supports RTAC, and maybe he can help us out, because I think if they can get things started, and then they can hand over the hosting to someone that's there.
Okay, Len. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Well, for the record, I mean, I've been told by my employer that it's of no consequence that we're using my employer's Zoom. The only reason why we should, in my opinion, the primary reason to investigate something from CTPS, MPO, MassDOT is just simply so that I'm not the only person who could start the meeting. Because if we're using my employer's Zoom, then it literally has to be me to hit the start button.
Yep.
I can make other people co-hosts like I always do as a backup. But if I'm sick or on a vacation and I can't get to an internet connection, there's no Zoom, at least not using this account. That's the primary reason. A secondary reason to get resources for these meetings would be, like I was saying, if there was a screen or something where we could have like a remote participant virtual presence, similar to what's in the 45 High Street conference room, where there's multiple screens, and I'm sure they have Zoom participants on those screens. If that was able to be put into 10 Park Plaza conference rooms, that would be perfect. But to be determined.
So we need to move to public comments, but before that, are there any old or new business or reports on external meetings that we haven't brought up?
I could talk about the wrap up of the Forging Ahead series. I don't know if that is relevant, since I had already talked about several that I had attended in the November meeting of this group. It was more of the same. The culmination had a high degree of participation, not just from the public, but from elected officials, which was very nice to say. I'll leave it at that unless anyone wants to delve more deeply into the Forging Ahead meetings that I attended.
Well, thank you. And what about public comments? Barry, or I guess it's Barry.
Yeah, I actually have a question. Have there been any further developments in the fare collection devices?
It's a good question.
Well,
I haven't.
there was a presentation maybe 2 or 3 months ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, because I was wondering about that too, and then I saw a presentation. So clearly it was moving forward, and this was post the beginning of the pandemic, and so the time frame's been changed. But I'm not sure about the cost. So the short and rather incomplete. Well, the short answer is yes, Barry, but just can't provide you with any more details. I'll see if I can find that deck.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm looking as well. Not seeing it.
Yeah, it's so hard to search the FMCB presentations.
Yeah, exactly. I download all the PDFs, but even then, it's hard to search through. I mean, I've got like 5,000 MBTA PDFs on my computer. I guess one other note, I don't want to jump backwards, but if there's no other public comments, I'll just mention one other external meeting. I mentioned it very quickly in the discussion about Ryan's presentation, how about the quote unquote high bridge project, which is affecting, or actually going to have almost no effect on the Lowell line service after all. It is notable that the current speed limit over that bridge, because of its age, is 25 miles an hour. And after the bridge is replaced, it's going to be back up to 35 miles an hour, which is the speed all the way. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that area of the railroad yards and switching areas, but the Lowell line starts to rise up just south of the Boston Engine Terminal, and it goes up on an incline to that bridge which is being replaced, and then the Lowell line curves around behind Inner Belt Road and goes sort of parallel to New Washington Street before it begins to go more northward. That entire section is rated for 35 miles an hour, except for that area of the bridge. So trains can speed up a little bit, then they got to slow down again when they get to the bridge. Then once they're across the bridge, they can speed up again. Going from 25 to 35 doesn't sound like a lot, but considering how long it takes to accelerate a commuter rail train and how early they have to start slowing to get from 35 down to 25, I think it is going to make a notable improvement of many minutes on the Lowell line schedules.
Does it have any interaction with the flag stop at Boston Engine Terminal? I mean, you can't be going 35 miles an hour if you're picking up an engineer.
That's correct. And if memory serves me correct, indeed, yeah, that flag stop for Keolis crew is also served by that Lowell line. Yeah, I believe it's all of them. I believe it's the Eastern route, Western route, and New Hampshire route, which is Newburyport, Rockport, Haverhill, and Lowell. They all converge, and then there's that little pickup spot for the crew.
It's a little bit more complicated than the flag stop at GE and Lynn, because that one has a lot more running room.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But again, if memory serves me correct, before the pandemic, as a regular, one inbound, one outbound commuter rail rider, it had been over a year or more since I'd been on a train that stopped for a crew member there. I think somebody told me that they were being encouraged to not use revenue service trains because of the impact on schedules. You know, because it adds many minutes to the trip to
Right.
come to a stop, pick somebody up at, you know, even though it's crew, and then to start up again.
Yeah.
But that's a very good point, Wig. Thank you. But
maybe it will be eliminated.
Yeah, I think that's it for what I was going to comment on that external meeting.
Well,
If
we
I
might
may
be able to end the last meeting of the year a little early for this this subpart. We're a couple minutes ahead. Anybody have anything else?
Yeah, I have
Sure.
a question about the new high bridge. Is there going to be any more vertical clearance over the valley track?
That's a great question. I believe yes, but only a little bit. Actually, it's also worth mentioning. When they showed the engineering diagrams, I'm not going to take the time to pull it up because it may be of limited interest, but I did note that the horizontal clearance under the new span is going to be about 25 feet less than what it is currently. So I made it a point to ask the engineers at the meeting, had there been a study done to ensure that reduced 25-foot clearance, which is basically the equivalent of 2 tracks, is that going to negatively impact any future expansion? And they said, we have analyzed it. The T has said that there will not be any future expansion that would require that 2-track capacity in the lifespan of this bridge that's being put in.
I'm talking about the vertical clearance.
Yep. I think the vertical clearance is going to be improved, but only by, you know, a foot at the most. But I can dig up the exact spec. It's not a significant change vertically. The dimensions of the new bridge are pretty much all the same as the current bridge, except for the new one's going to be a little more northerly, and the horizontal span is going to be narrower. Otherwise, it's pretty much all the same.
Thank you.
Well, I think we're all set. Emily, thank you for helping us this year, and hope everybody has a happy holiday, notwithstanding our current situation.
Yep.
Thanks. So I wanted to say thank you to you and Stefan for leading us as co-chairs, and looking forward to your continued participation, accepting the nominations in 2021 as well. Thank you, guys.
My pleasure. I really enjoy it. Before we wrap up, Karen, again, as always, you're very quiet, which is fine. Just want to make sure you have an opportunity to give any last words before we break.
No, let's hope 2021 is a heck of a lot better than 2020.
Hear, hear.
Here. Happy New Year, everybody.
Have a great holiday and New Year's, and thank you, everybody.
Take care. Stay safe, guys.
See you next year.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.